Tonight, part 4 of a special 4-part documentary series called State of Emergency.
News 21, a national reporting initiative based at the Cronkite School, brings top journalism students from across the country together to report and produce in-depth pieces.
Tonight, the focus is a rising threat. Flooding is reshaping life in rural America. Unprecedented events are catching farmers in small towns unprepared. Communities built around the water are now losing their livelihood and history to it.
It was a tremendous amount of water, and it was still rising. I've never seen the devastation from the flooding in Arkansas since I've been able to fly. I don't know all the people, but I've lived here long enough. When I see somebody's place, I know who it is and how it affects them and where they're coming from, where their heart is. This time it's deeper. The flood stage is about 6 foot more this time than it has been since '73.
But this is all high ground here, and it's all flooded. You can see a little bit over there where it came down.
This one in my lifetime is the highest that's been recorded.
This is incredible damage. I mean, it's just the neighborhood is gone.
We're getting water from the river and from the sky.
The wildfire war is not a war that we will win.
If ever the cavalry was needed, it is now, and it is in New Orleans.
It always happens to everybody else. Sometimes we're that everybody else.
You do what you gotta do to survive, and so that's what we did.
I just thought that we were gonna die.
I lost 100% of everything.
We have to start somewhere, and we have to rebuild.
We can't keep losing people like this.
We got to help each other.
We will find ourselves facing another disaster, and it's only a matter of time about when that will be.
You don't know where it's going to hit, and you don't know when.
You can't beat Mother Nature.
Senate District 35 actually is taking a direct hit from what we're calling the Great Arkansas Flood of 2019. It's being said a 500-year flood, one of the worst flood disasters in history. Literally right in the middle of that is the Toad Suck Lock and Dam.
This store had never taken in water, and so it's sort of been a canary in the coal mine. It took water completely this time, so it was not spared either.
All the rivers were full, so it was set up to have this kind of flood. We stayed open as long as we could to sell down as much merchandise to help out the community. We knew at that point that we were pretty well going to go under.
We are a team. This is our business together. This is our family business. And I just happened to be out here at the moment that we had to just give up the fight. We just had to walk away. We had to just let go. It was just a punch in the gut.
With this kind of water, you're not going to stop it. I fought it for several days, pumping water, and it just eventually caught up. You just go from survive mode to remodeling mode and tear everything out and start all over and hope that this doesn't come again very soon.
The water that came was so much more than we could prepare for or ever expected. It's very heartbreaking for us.
The community is what keeps us in business. It's a good community, and that's why we're rebuilding. I got to get those right now.
We're sad that we've lost our business, but we're even more sad for all of the families in Arkansas, all along the river, that have lost their homes.
It's kind of traumatizing. Everything you worked for your whole life is just ruined. This is a real natural disaster right here. This was historic. The truck that we're riding in is too low to the ground to get through the water. We can't get to my house today because the debris and the water is all too high. I'm a dad. I work 40 hours a week just like everybody else, and I live here in the country. Some people are a lot worse off than I am. I'd be scared for my family to come back and live in this. Just to be honest with you, me and my wife had discussed moving on. We never have before because Mayflower is such a small knit community. Everybody pulls together, helps everybody out.
It's scary when it rains down here.
People freak out, the signs go up saying flash flood. Anybody could be caught in this storm at any given time, and somebody could pass away again. I have a service dog, Duke. I moved from the beach when I went blind. It's a typical day. We knew that it was going to rain. It started to rain, not that heavy, and then it picked up a little bit. I was out talking to Barry at Forget Me Not. Barry had looked down at the curb and noticed that the water had jumped the curb. And he said, "You better get back to your house because this could be bad." By the time I had made it to the 3rd floor and then opened the windows, when I realized that it was literally 13 feet of water. Duke and I sat there and kind of stared at each other, and houses and telephone poles and 188 cars are flying by over 6 hours of time. The fire department and the Coast Guard came and they screamed up to the window, you know, "Come out, come to the window." They wanted me to leave my dog at first, and I was like, I'm not leaving Duke. We'll just tough it out. Probably about 2 hours after that is when they came back. The one guy picked up Duke and we locked arms and we crossed the street. I'm very lucky. I mean, I'm lucky to be alive. I think anybody that's been in any flash flood that can walk away from it is lucky, because until you've been in a flash flood, you really don't know. It happens beyond imagination. It just happens so quick. Here we are 3 years later with really no difference. Nothing has changed as far as getting better prepared. They have put up signs, they're about that big, and it says, you know, when the siren goes off, get to high ground. But if you're not from the area, you don't really know what that means.
I grew up in Niobrara, Nebraska, yes. I grew up on a farm 5 miles south of town. It's home. Our business is, first of all, a tavern with a steakhouse, restaurant, and then there are 3 rooms attached for hotel guests. Summers here are usually very busy. There's always someone on the street. There's always someone in the grocery store. Since March 15th, there aren't any people in the chairs. The business has dropped probably to at least 1/3 and almost 1/4 of what we had. The whole area's been kind of impacted. It's not just Niobrara, it's the surrounding little towns too. So it's been kind of a depressed sort of time. First of all, the roads. There is no way to get to Niobrara. It's been a real financial struggle for everyone. There isn't much help out there for people that are still trying to make a living running their businesses. You're on your own.
So we've been in the grocery store business ever since, in 1965. Our business has probably decreased over half since the flood. I think it's probably affected all the businesses in Niobrara because people just weren't able to get here. It's tourist season when we're at our busiest time. It's going to be 4th of July pretty soon, and we don't expect much. We go to our other store at Lynch, which before the bridge was washed out, it was 24 miles west of here. And now it's a 180-mile round trip because we have to go up through South Dakota and then backtrack back to Lynch. And so it's a mess.
Farming in this area is a big part of our economics. If the farmers aren't doing well, no one's doing well.
I'm standing in part of our alfalfa field, or it used to be alfalfa field, next to the Verdigris Creek, which actually flooded about 3 months ago. Probably about 15 acres, as you can kind of see some areas washed out back here. There's some lower lying areas where water is still standing, and you know, with this sand covering like this, it won't grow through here. In places like where we're standing right now, it's probably 3 to 4 foot deep, and it'll have to be with a bulldozer and some scrapers that we'll need to kind of level it out, and then we'll have to reseed this area. Hopefully there's still enough ground underneath there. It'll probably have to be fertilized enough again too, so that we can start producing some alfalfa from it again, or some other crop that can be produced here. The damage is it's gonna take years to reclaim a lot of this ground and and a lot of the people are going to be, struggling for a while from it. The flooding is something we've had before. It's flooded just, a little, and we've never had this big of a scope, and it was kind of like probably a once-in-a-lifetime type deal.
Waterways do a lot for our industry out here. Nebraska's #1 industry is agriculture. Everybody knows that. The first thing they think about is cattle, maybe the second about corn. With that being said, this flood is widespread. We know this. The rain events, if you track them, are unprecedented. There's 600% of normal moisture in some areas of Nebraska. High rainfall after the flood caused more saturation of soils, which delayed planting throughout the entire United States. We have springs literally running out of hillsides. That makes it very difficult to plant when your tractor's stuck in the hill. Highway 12 is out. There's a bridge completely out. Farmers and ranchers have to take commodity all the way around. I'm one of them. Instead of sending a truck an hour and a half west, I have to send a truck driver now 3 hours out of the way. Who pays for that extra fuel? Who pays for that extra wear and tear? And who pays for that extra labor? Insurance companies don't look back, and federal government just seems to be non-existent. I foresee this being at least a 4- and 5-year trial to get out of what this flood has created for us. This water underlying problem is ruining our infrastructure with no foreseeable way out.
I've seen a bunch of ducks moved in. I have not seen anything else. I mean, there's a bunch of jokes going around. Somebody's seen the Loch Ness Monster, but I don't believe that's true. I don't think anybody alive seen flooding here on the front side like this. It threatens our ability to grow feed for our dairy cows because we're in the milk production business. You'll worry in a drought, but you'll starve in a flood.
So 2018 was one of the wettest years on record, and tomatoes do not like it wet. So we had a lot of wet fields, and it brought on a lot of disease pressure and other issues, and productivity was way down. I've been told from grandparents and parents that they never seen a year like it, so I take their word for it. After a week of rain, you think, oh, this'll pass, but it just kept coming. A lot of vegetables do not have good taste if they have rain and wetness, so it created a lot of poor quality fruit. For strawberries example, we lost half of our crop. They rotted out because of all the rain and flooding from last year. This year is definitely more normal coming into this year, so it's getting better already.
Well, the township, they just said everything was working fine. Well, you can see it's not working fine. I just don't know where the water's coming from. That's an act of nature, and we just have to let nature play its course.
A large part of America's population lives near the coast. We naturally, as human beings, gravitate to the water. Metropolitan cities, rural areas along the coastal plains. All of us live in areas that are going to be irreparably affected if sea level rise is a real challenge in the 100 years to come.
Come on, dogs. Come on, let's go. My family has been on these islands since before the Revolutionary War. My blood literally runs deep into this soil. So all this is important to me. In 2003, Hurricane Isabel was heading for the East Coast. This caught us on that high tide, and the water had nowhere to go, and it just came in and shoved everything up. People's houses was flooded, garages, boats floating all over the place, just devastated the island. And as we're going on through, I'm walking over top of all these logs, and all of a sudden my foot hit something. And it was hard, and it was solid, and it didn't move. And I pulled the weeds away, and when I did, there was a headstone, a little child's headstone. He was one of the closest ones to the shore, and he was the first one that I lost overboard. When I first found it, I only found maybe about 20, and there's at least 75 people here that I've identified, and I still find more today. When I stumbled on this piece of history, I said, wow, this has got to be saved. Looks like that's a vertebrae. It could be part of the hip bone or something. But the bones are literally coming right out of the bank. It was a land grant, a 905-acre plantation from the King of England. There's not even 905 acres left of this island. So much of it is washed away. This is our history, not necessarily my history, but it's ours as an island. There's parts out here where there was probably over 40 foot of land. And that period of time that I've been working here, which has been about 17 years now, I've seen over 40 foot of land in places gone, just disappear from erosion. I normally always come down here after a big storm because I want to see what has happened. How many headstones do I need to pull back from the shore so they don't fall over the bank? Sea level rise, the water comes up the same height as it did when I was a child. But this erosion, it seems to be accelerated because there's so many storms. I don't see sea level rise being an issue here, but erosion is what's hurting everything. And it's important to try to save this for future generations and keep these people's memory alive.
I have a family, but like your whole island is your family. We know everybody's skeletons in their closets, and they know probably mine, so that's the way it is. I'm a full-time resident on Smith Island, born and raised here. Hopefully I'll die here, but that's not in my hands. I was a waterman for a long time. When I was a kid, I'd say it was maybe 600-700 people lived out here. Now in all three parts, it's somewhere around 180, 190. People older died off. There's nobody coming up young ones. When they die off, that's it. There's no more Smith Island watermen. In our community in the middle of the Chesapeake Bay, you will find severely opposing points of view on sea level rise because we sit in an area of the world where tides rise and fall 4 times a day. I think sea level rise slowly erodes communities and things like that. But there are other factors that are going to have a bigger effect than that, I believe. No, we're not sinking. We're washing away, but we're not sinking. The Lord looks out for us. We live on this little island out here in the bay. A lot of things can happen, but we make out fine. We pray to the Lord about it, and He takes care of it.
I've always had a connection to water. Water to me is the lifeblood of Mother Earth. You know, that's what keeps Mother Earth going if you think about it. None of those plants, none of the people, nobody's going to grow and live without water. It means a great deal to me. I feel more connected living here. The solitude, the wide open spaces, you can go outside and you just see beauty. Because of the water going over the road, we couldn't get out with our vehicle for 18 days.
Holy crap.
We were watching the debris coming, big logs. I mean, there were some strange things, tires, and then the chunks of ice started coming. School finally let out at about noon, and my son couldn't get home. Luckily, the bus driver let him stay with his house. He was stuck in town for 2 days. But that day of the flood, he was calling us all the time, making sure we were still alive because he was worried that feasibly our house could get wiped out.
There's no way out. No way out for us at all.
That was very, very emotional. I didn't know what was going on with him because I wasn't there physically with him, and I could hear in his voice him being scared. And I was scared. I mean, we were all scared out here anyway. But having him be away like that was hard for me. It was very hard.
Yeah.
coming home. Oh, you're home, buddy. Here, I've always wanted to live by a running stream or river. And then the flood happened, but
Our tribe came from the Ohio Valley in the 1600s or in that neighborhood. When we moved, any of our moves put us in close proximity to the river at all times.
The tribe itself, the name Umaha, means against the current. That's who we are. We're people that live against the current. But unfortunately, with Mother Nature, the current is getting the best of our reservation right now with the floodwaters.
This was what's left of a 5-bedroom home. Part of the problem was that historically this is where families lived. When they had to move out of this, they had to move into the town of Macy proper. They wanted to live rural, unable to do that now. Although this is tribal land, this is where their families historically lived, and that's gone.
How us Native people believe is that Mother Nature is telling us something. Something's not going right. Something's not going the way she wants it to. This is almost like the fury of her giving everybody a wake-up call to, change your ways, to, work together and, do good things. And that's the way I see it. This land is all we have. This is all that we have left to preserve, to live on, to be proud of.
Yep. Doesn't look like they want to participate.
The biggest impact to us thus far has been the way the rain's been coming. It's just not getting a long enough drying period where we can get the hay to dry out. Basically, we ran out of hay before we could put them out to pasture in spring, so we were forced to go out and buy hay. But it cost us probably $10,000 to $15,000 extra dollars that we weren't anticipating, because typically we have extra every year. It's hard to predict the weather, of course, but if we could somehow be more predictive and be able to determine what the weather outlook is going to be like over a 5-day period, that would be huge for us. You'd have to adjust your farming practices. I mean, it's tough making money farming. We try to make money, but it's really a difficult proposition. For me, a lot of it's about the animals too. I've always wanted to be on a farm and have the husbandry with the animals, and that. It's paradise, to be out here and be able to do this.
The storm set me back at least a year. Having to spend more time and energy and money that you didn't plan on, that was more of the economic impact. I had other plans before it started raining and we got flooded constantly. I had plans to create a roadside market. I had hundreds of plants of tomatoes. The 100-mile-an-hour winds came right over our property. It just sort of devastated it, and we just cleaned up, and we're here now, and we're moving forward. I planted some hemp plants this morning. They could all flood out, or I could have a really good crop.
There was a lot of farmers affected from the flooding issues. Every few years you have good spells and you have bad spells, and that's just the way it is. Farming has been my livelihood all growing up all my life. Farming, as I like to explain it, is more of a lifestyle. It's not a let's get rich quick thing. It's year in and year out, long-term commitments, and you just keep going.
It's a family. My dad is in his 80s, and so, a few years ago when he kind of retired and I took over, it's kind of been a challenge at times. I enjoy it. It gets in your blood after a while, being born here, being brought up here. If you're not raised on a farm or being acquainted, with it, it's kind of hard to understand, the hard work and the time that goes into it. However, that's part of the whole farming situation. It's always a gamble. Things like this are tough to overcome, but overcoming is something that we will do and that we've already started working on, and it'll take years in some situations, but it's a very rewarding and self-satisfying occupation.
Well, there's no doubt when a town gets blown down by a tornado or something, that makes news real fast. And this kind of moves in real slow and just does its damage more slowly, and it's harder to see.
You have to have a game plan that you can change. I mean, there's just no way that you know what's coming. I think going forward, it's just I'm in a better spot right now. We've made progress and we're continuing to make progress and clean things up and give it a new look, because it's not going to look like it used to. And just make the best of it. But there's only so much you can do. You just pick up the pieces and move on.